Hey kids, I'm here in the garage doing some woodworking, the old saw and beams and a 4x4 hefty piece of lumber. And it made me started to think about Matthew 7. Matthew 7's that famous verse that says, "Judge not, lest you be judged." And we often hear this with people who have maybe different lifestyles, alternative lifestyles. They love to use this verse as, hey, get off my back, don't judge. And it fits, right? Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged. Whatever judgment you use, it'll be used against you. He then gives an interesting analogy, and Christians actually like to use this analogy as a way to, as a teaching on how to properly judge. But I don't believe that either point of view is actually very free. And Jesus wanted to give us a free way of living with this verse. You see, with his analogy, he talks about sawdust. This little sawdust, you probably can't even see it. But when this sawdust gets in your eye, it is horrible. It's the end of the world, right? You got to do everything just to get that little speck of dust out of your eye. You can't do anything. It stops life. And Jesus gives a funny, strange analogy when he's talking about judgment. He's saying, how can you, when you've got a plank in your eye, a beam, a log, some translations say, but it's a big beam, or a plank, a piece of scaffolding in your eye? How do you even have a piece of scaffolding in your eye? You see, Jesus gives this impossible, preposterous analogy. He's saying, get the beam out of your eye first before you can get the speck out of the person's eye. But what if that's impossible? What if that is actually what it is preposterous? What if Jesus is saying it kind of like this? Hey, you think you can get the speck out? Why don't you try to get the plank out of your eye? That impossibly crazy thing that's in your eye, yeah, why don't you just try to get that out before you get the speck out? You see, it's not a prescription on proper judgment. He's not giving us a way to properly manage our beams so that then we can work on the speck of the other person's eye. It's not a prescription on proper judgment. You see, it's an analogy, a crazy, kind of cool and interesting analogy of his point, to prove his point, to add to his point. And what was his point? Judge not. Don't judge. That was his point. You see, either way, either don't judge, let me just live my life, this is, anything goes kind of idea, lifestyle, that's not a very free way of living. There's much evil and darkness that comes along with that kind of living. But there's also much evil and darkness when it comes to managing your planks so that you can judge people's lifestyle. Both ways of living are not very free. And I think what Jesus is giving us here is a doorway, is an opening to a free way of living. A way of living where you're not under the constraints of judgment. See, I go to skate parks and I hang out with these young men who have this, hey, don't judge me, anything goes as long as I'm not hurting anybody kind of attitude. And when they find out that I'm a Christian, I can almost sense it starting to happen that, okay, are you going to judge this thing that I'm hiding over here in my bag, the little joint or the booze that they're hiding in the pop can, right? These things that are hidden here, are you going to judge it? Should I let you see this? I'm looking at it, yes, it's a speck, it's a thing in your life, but it's just like sawdust in your eye. It really is affecting your life. And that's the difference. When I'm walking with God in this place, I'm seeing it for what it is. These things of drugs or alcohol or whatever it might be, yeah, they're just specks, but they're also intense demonic pressure. It's intense entrapment into a lifestyle that is not free. It seems free, especially when you're young, you're 18 and 16 and the whole life's ahead of you and it's just fun. It feels very free. But I also do a lot of outreach downtown. And when I'm working with Denver Rescue Mission or in these places and they're trying to help older gentlemen who are just ravaged by the effects of this prison of drugs and alcohol. So many of them just pleading and trying desperately to get out of these jail cells. You see, they know very well it's not a free way to live. You see, don't judge, let me do whatever I want. Sure, that seems very free, but the reality is it can, if you're not aware of the spiritual reality behind it, it leads to imprisonment. And the free place of being a child of God who's just doing and saying what God is saying, I can go to that skate park, I can see the specks in their eyes, and I don't have to jump to my own ideas on ways to get rid of that stuff. Here, let me tell you how bad that stuff is. Let me try to argue you out of that, even though I see it for what it is and the demonic and the horrible evil that it really is. I don't have to go to my teaching. I don't have to go to my judgment of their lifestyle. I can literally go to them and say, hey, as far as it is for me, nothing wrong with what you're doing, as far as it is for me. And then I can go into, God, what would you have me share with him? What would you have me say? You see, I'm not the one who has to have the authority to say this is right or wrong. When I live in that place, it's really free. I can just freely go there and offer the words of God. And when that happens, God helps me go right to the heart of the issue. And I've found so many times that when I'm speaking what God is speaking in a place, man, heart issues come out and they often start to say, yeah, I don't like this. I really don't want to be in this way. And I actually have to fight the temptation when that starts to happen and the heart things and things start to get real. I have to fight the temptation to try to go into a teaching. Because I have found that even the best advice that man can offer only leads to motivation, a motivation to fix yourself or manage behavior. But God can give us words that speak directly to the heart and words that bring freedom and true peace. Thank you, and God bless.